What's up, everybody? This is Kian, and welcome to my next podcast. And in this series, as I promised and as I told you guys so many times before, I'm gonna help you guys learn English faster and prepare for the IELTS test a lot more effectively. And today we're gonna talk about the internet and whether course books are gonna be replaced by online books. So with the wide availability of the internet, many people actually think that one day we don't need course books in classrooms anymore because everything can be found on the internet. But this line of reasoning is totally wrong because course books have been developed by experts, like pedagogical experts, who can assure that these books are effective in helping children learning. And there are many things that are associated with course books as well. For example, teachers can design tests based off of what is written in course books to gauge children's development and academic performance. It is clear that if the teaching of knowledge or if the transferring of knowledge from teacher to learner is to be effective, we need a way to measure this process. And teachers can be creative in the ways that they use course books. For example, they may just assign some pre-lessons so that their students can learn things beforehand. And when they go to class, it is more about them practicing rather than listening to teachers. And it makes lessons less teacher-led and more about autonomous learning. I think this independent learning habit is very crucial and precious when it comes to teaching children. We just don't teach them what they should know, and we should also teach them how to study as well. And this actually fosters a very important skill, which is self-studying. I can't stress this enough, really. Whenever I have a class to teach, I always make sure that my students actually prepare beforehand. And the time that they spend in class is actually used for their practice. When it comes to learning languages, this is very crucial because if you go to class and you just learn some phrases and words, which could actually be done at home by getting online, right? It's simply a waste of time because when you go to class, it is important that you be given time to practice and you can have a chance to be corrected if you make some mistakes. But it is important to note that the use of the internet should only be a guided learning process, but not a data gathering exercise, because the reliability of sources on the internet is not really something that I would praise, and it is actually a very mature skill for people to do when they have to discriminate between sources and self-information. School children are simply not ready to do such a task, and there's a good chance that they may read very misleading information and assume that they know all the facts. But in reality, they just know some false information, which can be very damaging to their intellectual development. So I feel that the internet can be a useful supplement to the learning process, but it can never replace course books completely. Having said that, I also think that we need to factor in a very possible scenario where, course books are not useful anymore because, there may be some platform where children can, find all the reliable information, or some very prestigious teachers actually create some lessons online where they actually provide all the information needed before they go to class. And I don't think that children may actually need course books anymore. But of course, even though course books may not be needed in that case, I still think that they need to do homework. And They still need to print something out and then turn it into their teachers. But of course they can also do it online, which is not really something that is unlikely. But this can only happen when there are some available platforms where we can trust the reliability or credibility of the teachers there. Well, as someone put it, never say never. Alright, so I think that's it for the topic of course books, whether the role of course books is diminishing or not. Right, so let's talk about the costs of university education. Of course, it is very expensive worldwide, but today we're gonna talk about the reasons why university education is so costly. So, what seems to be at the core of the prohibitively expensive costs of university education is probably the reduction in state subsidy for university courses. For example, when my school was still a state-run one, I only needed to pay about $100 or $200 for a term, but now I guess the tuition fees are about $1,000 or $2,000 for a term, because my school has recently declared independence from state subsidies. And another driving factor behind the increasing costs of university education is the increasing living expenses in big cities, because they are where schools are often concentrated. And another factor that we also need to think about is related to the difficulty in finding work, like a part-time job, while a student is studying. Well, it is not really difficult to find a work per se, but it is the wage that is offered to students. Oftentimes, part-time work is very poorly paid, and students often think that it is wiser to use the time for studies. And another factor that also drives up the cost of education, especially university education, is the fact that universities nowadays even pay money to upgrade their aesthetic look. So they just pay a lot of money to build very beautiful buildings, and they equip their labs with the most state-of-the-art technologies. Of course, if they have money, they can actually do it. There's nothing wrong with it. But it is a fact that the costs are often met by increasing tuition fees. But this is making it so much harder for students to pursue higher education. In my opinion, there's very little that can be done about it, because I don't think that the government is gonna pay money for university education. Of course, they still keep providing some subsidies for some institutions, but that's it. I don't think that they will increase the amount of subsidies that they are providing for universities, because most universities seem to be doing just fine on their own. So there's no need for government intervention. And besides this, the government is also having a lot on their plate. Yeah, and it would be very unlikely that they would actually pay money or allocate a larger proportion of money to university education. I think a better way would be for universities to offer more practical courses and shorter courses, because if students can have a chance to work for the school or work during their studies, then they can earn some money when they still study. And since the courses are shorter, they can save money in the form of travel and accommodation. And the best way is for students to opt for online learning, because this way they themselves can eliminate the additional costs of accommodation and travel, and they can choose to finish their courses like faster, because one of the perks of studying online is that online learners can actually cover the material at their own pace. Well, let me see if we can talk about other things. Well, probably I'll call it a day and see you guys in my next podcast.